Sometimes I'm feeling like Michael. We taking a stand, creating a plan, and beating the cycle. We got a whole lot of what we gotta do. Give me the raw, give me the real, just give me the truth. We start a conversation, then let the world debate it. Breath of fresh air coming through just like ventilation. And no boy, let me tell you about the squad. A dream team, so you know they coming hard. Now first up, let me tell you about Jay. You know he wise, man, that boy got knowledge for days. Check out his mind. Then we got Sean coming through like Thanos, keep him in line. He's a quiet storm, but don't get it twisted, you see the grind. And next up, we gotta talk about Nate. You know she slay. She got the brains and the beauty plus strength to keep him straight. And last but not least, we got Nostradamus. He's the voice of the people, so he'll keep it poppin'. My squad gon' keep it 100, and that's all facts. They're here to spark the conversation. Now you debate that.
Welcome to another episode of Debate That, where we discuss relationships, pop culture, social issues, and much, much more. My name is Jay.
I'm Sean.
And Nay is not with us today. She had a prior engagement. She taking care of it. Our girl be shaking and moving, but I get it. Mr. Nostradamus, what we got for today?
Today's question is, how do you feel about cancel culture, and should it be a thing?
I don't particularly think it should be a thing. I get it, but I think people use it to like weaponize certain issues or whatever. Like they use it as a weapon to go against somebody who don't necessarily agree with them. And I think that just gets away from us being able to grow.
So let me define cancel culture real quick, because I was having a conversation with somebody and they didn't even know what it was. So, there's a couple definitions I was looking at. One says cancel culture is a modern form of ostracism in which someone is thrust out of social or professional circles, either online, on social media, in the real world, or both. Those who are subject to this ostracism are said to be canceled. So that's one definition. The other definition says cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. It's generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming.
Okay.
So what you got, Sean?
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, you got a lot of examples out here, when it comes to canceling culture. But, can you really cancel it, though? Is my question, because once a person kind of leaves their mark, it's there, regardless of how you like it or you don't. If you do like it, if you don't like it, the mark is made. A lot of people didn't feel, for an example, your Michael Jacksons, when it came down to kids and accusing them of doing this and doing that with kids. But at the end of the day, that footprint he left is still a footprint, And can you cancel out Michael Jackson? Hell no. So how can you really cancel it? When it comes down to canceling culture.
To me, it seems like the cancellation takes from being able to make it a teachable moment. Like if something like the Kevin Hart situation, where you're looking at 10 plus years ago, where things were different, and then people want to go back, pull up things that happened that long ago, and then bring it back and be like you said this. But when you're looking at people evolve. So he came from that to here and became a totally different person. He's not that person. Certain stuff that people I'm around say a long time ago, and then they get to this point, you got to give people time to evolve. Everybody ain't where you're at. So when it comes to a certain topic, you may be, leaps and bounds ahead in that particular topic. But when it comes to something else, you may be way behind and somebody else may be ahead. I got to give that person the opportunity to learn, evolve, and become better. But if I don't, I just can't jump on them and be like, oh, you should have said this, you should have said that. Well, I'm not in that every day. I don't understand nor get that. You got to give me the opportunity.
So that's what I was going to mention too, is like, you know, you got to kind of take into account the time frame when things happen, right? Because a lot of times with cancel culture, what they're doing is they're pulling up stuff from the past and then they're using it in the present to say, we're not going to support this individual or this company anymore, right? But you got to look at like some things, like you mentioned, Jay, like 10, 15 years ago at that time, it may not have been acceptable, for lack of better terms, but it was kind of normal for stuff to be said in a certain way 10 to 15 years ago. So if you said it,
facts.
I mean, you just kind of adapting to what it was back then. But as you move forward and then you grow and you change, you start to understand, well, maybe that's not the best thing. But I also feel like cancel culture started because, you know, people were became too sensitive. Like everything bothers me. So once it bothers me, I have to cancel you out. I can't support you anymore because it hurt my feelings. And that's the thing that I don't like about the whole cancel culture aspect is I think you said earlier, Jay, like people use this whole cancel culture thing to cancel people as a weapon, to weaponize it, you know, and that's the thing that I hate about it. But
I say this. Do you realize that with this whole cancel culture thing, we wouldn't have a culture if you really cancel culture. You know what I mean? And when I say that, I mean, I'm a product of, you know, the 80s. I'm an 80s baby. But I'm a product of, you know, your Nas, your Biggies, your, you know, the Big Daddy Kings, you know, if we want to look at the hip hop aspect of it. Now, music back then, did they glorify really selling the drugs part? No. But did they do it? Yeah. Is it acceptable as far as having a lifestyle of, okay, you move and weight? Not necessarily. But at the end of the day, you would have to cancel culture at that point. You know what I mean? Because it's not something that's supposed to be glorified, I should say. You know what I mean? If you look at the fact that, okay, well, these guys probably made a living based off of the environment they were in, was probably moving weight, selling drugs, doing the different stuff they had to do to get by based upon the environment they were in.
So I don't think when they're using the term cancel culture, they're talking about canceling a culture or a time period. I think they're just saying like cancel culture, like that's what's going on right now, whereas like that's the thing to do. It's cancel culture. You know what I mean?
So you're a cancel individual, huh?
The culture of canceling.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the thing to do. Like, if I don't agree with what you said, I'm going to cancel you. Or if you said something that offended me, I'm going to cancel you. That's the culture. That's what they're saying. The culture is canceling. That's the
correct.
Culture.
But where's that line at? Because, like I said, I mean, I don't live a life of drug dealing and whatever and killing. You know what I mean? So where's the line to say, okay, well, should I cancel this person because this is what they stand by? You know what I mean? Or should I cancel the person who's talking about the alphabet community? You know what I mean?
So but that's the thing, to your example, you know, back then in the 80s, right? Like when people began selling drugs, like that was their means of making money because there wasn't anything else. So now,
well, there was other things.
Well, sure, there were other things, but some people found it easier to make money that way because they felt like that was their only option, right?
Correct.
And then, you know, they made their money, they moved on, they started doing something different. And then when they find out like this person sold drugs, it's like, oh, this person is bad. He sold drugs or she sold drugs. We got to cancel it. Like, but what I'm saying is back then in the 80s, like that was, you know, that was the thing to do because it was so bad back then. What else can, you know, there wasn't much you were able to do depending on who you were in your circumstances.
But based upon your environment, it's still the thing to do, depending on where you're at, where you're from. The lifestyle you live, it's still the thing to do. So how do you cancel that out? You know what I mean?
Well, you can't cancel that out, but how can you hold somebody accountable 15, 20 years later for something they did in the past?
Oh, I agree. You can't. I don't think you should, because like I said, that's my whole point. Is basically how can you bring up a situation of, like you said, I mean, you gave Kevin Hart as an example. how can you go digging when, like I said, if you look at the culture and you look at, like I said, you're talking about canceling culture, look at what the culture was built on. You know what I mean? Look what the people stood by in the culture. So how can you go and cancel, or you want to talk about, like you said, using it as weaponizing and, you know, canceling people out because you don't agree with something that they may have said back in the day, which isn't even irrelevant now. Or maybe the topic is relevant now, but it was ahead of its time. You know what I mean?
I feel like I don't like the cancel culture at all. Only due to, if you want somebody to understand your position, then you state what it is that you feel and you have a conversation. And you can disagree, and that's fine, right? But if it is correct, over time, time will dictate what's right, for the most part.
That's a fact.
Based on societal standards, and as things go, things will shift. So not necessarily time will dictate, but the people will. And then over time, if a person chooses to change their view of a certain thing, then it's easier for them to come out and say, hey, you know what? Remember we talked about back, whatever. Yeah, you're right. But it's harder for people to come out and say, when you want to cancel me and then kill everything that I got going. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, look at Nick Cannon for an example.
Yeah. So that's a teachable moment. In the Jewish community, they could have came, sat down, spoke with them, and behind closed doors, spoke with them, and then they can set some stuff up where he can come out, they can have a conversation, he can learn from it. Everybody's happy, everybody win, everybody moves on, right? But at the end of the day, when they came down and started taking stuff, it made the whole situation worse. So I want to kill everything that you got going on when I can actually teach something, and then the people who follow him can then learn from his mistake.
I would say there is a difference between that example versus a lot of other examples that I've seen as to where when things happen, right? So like the Nick Cannon joint, it was present. And yes, it should have become a teachable moment, but it was present. It's like when it happened, they were talking about canceling him right now for what happened versus other things where it's like they just dig up stuff for, you know, about you from the past. And then they want to say, I'm going to cancel you because of your past. You know, I mean, you mentioned Kevin Hart. I mean, look at R. Kelly. Like, you know, you listen to R. Kelly's music. We grew up listening to R. Kelly music. But once it, you know, I mean, we've seen all the videos, maybe. I don't know. I've never seen it because I'm not going to incriminate myself like that. But, you know, the videos were out there. You know, you still listen to music until I think within the last, 2 years, people started saying, no, I can't listen to R. Kelly music because.
But you still got people who do.
You do. So the thing is like, you know, there's a difference in when you're canceling somebody and what you're canceling somebody for.
But like, is it fair to cancel somebody for, I mean, you take, like I said, even though the Nick Cannon thing was a right now situation and may have been a teachable moment, but is it fair to cancel if a person is spitting at least some type of fact about what the situation is? Is it fair to say, okay, well, let's cancel this person out based upon what he feels in his heart is right, or he feels what's going on? You know what I mean? Should people have that type of power to say, hey, let's cancel him out. Let's cut off his shows. You know what I mean? And there might be facts. I think anybody who's willing to cancel somebody out like that, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's no perfect person in the world. Nobody lives a perfect life. But like I said, I think at that point, it can be teachable on both sides. You know what I mean? And like I said, I don't think it was a smart situation, not just for Nick Cannon, but that's a hard one because, like I said, you're almost kind of looking at it like, it's still kind of like the people who run the numbers and who moving these pieces on the chessboard has the power.
Well, that's why you need to have your own stuff. That's what it comes down to. So, you know, what Tyler Perry got over in Atlanta is ideal.
Brilliant.
But what that also does is now, if you can't shut me down, now it's forced to have the conversation. Now I can sit down and I can have a conversation with you, and you can have a conversation with me, and we can come to an understanding. But as long as I'm over you and I can control what you do, then I'll just shut you down. Instead of being a teachable moment, having a conversation, to me, it doesn't matter if it's 10 years ago or if it's today.
Correct.
And somebody, it's a teachable moment. You can catch more. What is it? You can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. Is that how it goes?
You mean bees?
Nah, I think it was flies.
I don't know.
Yeah. But whatever. The idea is, if you sit down and you have the conversation with people, you then teach a multitude of people, because Nick Cannon has a large following. So then now you can sit down, and I'm sure Nick Cannon would have came to the table and had a conversation about what was happening. And then they could have clarified everything, clear the air. Everybody's good. Show's still on. Everybody's making money, so forth and so on. And now what you wanted to get out got out. And then everybody's on the same page. Is everybody learn? But as long as you're canceling people, it's gonna be so much pushback for them to come back and apologize about stuff, when you can just have the conversation with somebody, and it's a lot easier, because those tables will turn one day, and they're gonna be the ones sitting on the other side.
You're right.
Cancel whoever.
And I think it comes down to, you know, sensitivity level. Like, you know, I'm overly sensitive about what you say because I don't agree with you, or because it offended me. And if it offends me, then that means I got to have a problem with it. Instead of just allowing you to have your opinion, whether right or wrong. I might disagree with your opinion, and it might be totally wrong, but hell, who am I to sit there and just be like, cancel, you're done? There's a couple of reasons for that. I think one is because, like you had said earlier, Jay, you had spoke about power, right? Sometimes people just want to show you, I have the power to control your lifestyle or control what you do. You know what I mean? And then the other thing is, if we think about it, though, I think some of that cancel culture comes from the fact that, you know, maybe historically it was just as inappropriate as it is now, but there wasn't enough people or enough garnering for me to express that and get backing for it. So now that everything's connected socially and worldwide, it's kind of like there's more people that feel a certain way about things. So now you can make it more known and more popular, to where it's like, it's just not you in school fighting for something. Now you got the whole, you know, a whole city that can be like, oh man, I relate to that. Let's cancel their ass. You know what I mean? They're done.
Well, I also think with like LGBTQIA, like with that community, because there are people, you're gonna have people who don't believe in certain things in that what's the word I'm looking for? Who don't believe in that lifestyle. So they have certain people who don't believe in that lifestyle. But at the end of the day, if you have conversations with other people, regardless if they agree or disagree, you still a human. At the end of the day, you still a human. People don't have to agree with you. People don't have to accept everything that you do. And that's okay. You can't force people to accept something. And you can't, on the flip side of that, you can't force people to change who they are. If that's who they are, then that's who they are. You love them for them, or you love them for because they're a human. At the end of the day, they're a person. So for me, I want to have the conversations with the people to understand better. If I don't agree, I don't agree, but at least I understand where you're coming from.
But guess what? You should be able to disagree and not be judged for disagreeing, to be canceled out because you disagree with a certain situation or a certain lifestyle or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? That's what I feel is living your truth. You should be able to live your truth and live it with no, I don't know. I forget the word I'm looking for at the end, but you should be able to live your truth, basically. You know what I mean? And everybody should be okay with it because, like you said, I mean, it's at the end of the day, you're human. You know what I mean? And that's the side you have to look at. That's the side that comes first. Because when I think of culture, like I said, I mean, we moved the needle on a lot of stuff. But for some reason, when it comes to canceling stuff, we don't get nothing canceled, really. You know what I mean? If you want to talk about canceling culture, huh?
Explain.
Well, I'm just saying, like, we don't, I mean, you can, like I said, we had this topic before when it came down to culture vultures. You know what I mean? But you look at these different people who might incriminate, like they got the whole big thing going on with, you know, homeboy with the podcast, Vlad, right? And they be talking about, oh, him incriminating people and this and that, whatever, which, you know, people incriminate themselves. But at the end of the day, they've been trying to get him canceled. He ain't canceled. People still doing interviews who look like me and you. You know what I mean? This is a Caucasian man. You're right. And they have that right, you know what I mean, to not agree with everything that's obviously being said out there. And that comes into you living your truth. You know what I mean? You don't have to agree with what I do, but at the end of the day, you're human. You know what I mean? So use that human side of it to, you know what I mean, stand there and deal with it.
So what about?
I like that, Sean. I like what you said in terms of y'all. You know, we move the needle when it comes to culture, but we can't get anything canceled as a culture. I got a perfect example too. When you look back, I can't remember what year it was, but just the Chris Brown Rihanna incident when he had, you know, beat her in the car and stuff like that. They got in a fight and he had those domestic violence charges on her. Like when that happened, everybody was, oh, you know, Chris Brown is bad. We ain't gonna support him anymore. I can't believe he would do that. Like, look, if you saw Rihanna, it looked like he really beat her. But as soon as he dropped a banger, a new #1 hit, everybody was back on the train.
You're right.
So and you make a good point. I think, you said we don't get anything canceled. So maybe, you know, like, you know, our boy True said, it shouldn't be called cancel culture. Maybe it should be called pause culture, because the same thing happened when Gucci came out. Was it Gucci where, you know, they tried to boycott Gucci for like the first few months or something like that? And then it was like after that, back on the train about Gucci again. Back on the train. Never missed a beat.
It's better to have a conversation and come to an understanding than to say we're gonna cancel this person, because the more you say cancel and it's not being done, the less effect it has when you really need it to be done.
Correct.
So instead of that, have the conversation, but people are just the emotional IQ is low when it comes to certain things, and they just get in their feelings. Yo, have a conversation with somebody that you disagree with, get an understanding. You still don't have to agree, but at least you can respect and understand where the other person's coming from and move. You can move from it at that point. The Chris Brown situation, like, I never left the Chris Brown as a fan of Chris Brown. I never really left because, one, I didn't see a pattern of this. Something's going on. Something triggered both of them. Now, correct. Should he have hit Rihanna? No, you was wrong. So you got to pay for that. Mm-hmm. The way that went down, you got to pay for that. But you also, like the episode that we did on mental health, you also got to check that, because if you want to help him, you help him there. To Nay's point, when she was like, you can choose your actions, but you can't choose your consequences. So in that situation, he chose his actions. You can't choose your consequences. You got to deal with it, right? Because you made that choice. But on the flip side of that, you gotta take the steps to get better, so you can be a better person later on. If he was exhibiting that behavior all that time, they would be totally different. One, he can still have those issues, but he never exhibited that. He never showed that. So because he never showed that, then there has to be something that was triggered and something that just took him overboard. But you still got to pay for what you did.
Correct. But that's the same thing, like I said. Michael Jackson. Do you cancel him out? No, you ain't going to cancel him out because you got a pattern of a Michael Jackson who says, you know what? I love all people. You know what I mean? I love children. I love adults, whatever. At the end of the day, my childhood wasn't the best. You know what I mean? It was militant. I didn't have the best childhood, but I'm going to create all this little stuff. And it's not to attract children. It's the more so, this is the life that, this is my mentality. This is how I'm looking at it.
He wanted to be a kid.
Exactly. The ish that I missed out on that I couldn't enjoy as a child, you know what I mean, that I felt I was deprived from, I created my own world that I can enjoy. Now I'm going to let other children come and enjoy this stuff. You know what I mean? Now at the end of the day, you know, you get one thing to say, hey, you know what? You know, my child was this, that, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, I don't think it was, and that's my opinion. And like I said, I mean, I don't think it went to that extent to where, like I said, anybody can go into, they tried to cancel Michael Jackson and say, oh, he's a child molester, this and that, whatever. But the only sign that you can say is that he'd allowed, whether it's healthy children or sick children, onto his ranch or to experience a life that they've never, ever even seen. You know what I mean? To experience. So that's the only pattern that you would be able to say and see. I mean, the R. Kelly situation is a little different.
So you might not cancel Michael Jackson out, but would you let your kids be around him without you?
Me personally, I wouldn't because I don't know what
Correct.
happened. So if it is true, I don't want to put my kids in that situation. If it's not true, I just don't know. So I wouldn't put my kids in the situation because we don't know if it's true or not.
Man, I'm going to answer the question for y'all. Hell no, I ain't letting my kids around Michael Jackson by themselves.
But you probably won't let your kids around anytime Dick and Harry by themselves. You know what I mean? Regardless of who the celebrity or non-celebrity. You know what I mean?
That's true.
At the end of the day, you want to know exactly what's going on at all times.
That's true, but you would be more reluctant with Michael Jackson.
It's only because do we know for sure that happened?
Let me ask you this. Would you let your kid be by himself with LeBron James or Michael Jordan?
No.
Exactly. So what's the difference?
But if you had to if you were forced to let your kid by themselves with Michael Jackson or Michael Jordan, who are you choosing?
Michael Jordan.
And that's only because you have the stipulation of thinking that whatever happened at this dude's ranch happened.
So that's how powerful that cancel culture is.
You're right.
Because it don't have to be true.
You're right.
Was that cancel culture or was that allegation culture?
That's both.
When did he get canceled?
He never really. They tried to get him canceled.
They tried to. Yeah, they tried.
Oh, look at Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby got canceled. Why? Because he wanted, and the word on the street was what? He wanted to buy a TV station. So the powers that be canceled him out when this was the way of life back in the 70s and 80s. This is what they did in the 70s and 80s. And I'm sure he ain't the only person who did it. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, that was their lifestyle, hippie, whatever the case may be. But he got canceled. And guess what? It didn't matter what age he's at. Like you said, Kevin Hart is older now. He's in a different place in life. And you want to bring up some stuff from 15 years ago. You got people who, hell, I don't know. I mean, when it comes to Bill Cosby, they were digging up people from everywhere. You know what I mean?
But I'm glad you brought up the Bill Cosby joint because, like you said, that's a real example of how people want cancel culture to work.
That's a perfect example.
Listen, Bill Cosby, like you said, the stuff that he was accused of doing back then was normal. Like you went to the bar and you took the drugs. I think it's only now that people, after number of years, people did a study and found like the pattern to say like when this happens, that's date rape. So these people 15 years ago who was okay with going to these parties or whatever and doing that, you know, multiple times, now 10, 15 years later, they're scarred and they probably feel bad about themselves for it happening. And then they read like, oh, that was rape. Oh, well, I got raped.
That was the lifestyle they chose to do. And then you take it to where we at right now, where people still take Molly. Same damn thing.
Correct.
So what's the difference?
Exactly. So you can't, to me, like I said before, you got to take into account that time frame of when the stuff was happening. That was normal versus now, to where studies have been done to show that it's not normal now. And so, you know, in my personal opinion, I ain't gonna lie, I still watch the Cosby Show on Amazon Prime, you know, and I hope he gets every cent of the replay while he's being held down for it.
Bro, I think it was just like you said, it was a sign of, you know, weaponizing the whole canceling of a culture. No matter, this dude is about 8 feet out of the grave. You know what I mean? And you're talking about you want to throw this dude away in jail. He done lived the most and the best parts of his life for the most part. You know what I mean? And doing the different things he wanted to do. But you go and get him by any means necessary.
Here's my question. How do you separate Bill Cosby from Dr. Huxtable? How do you separate R. Kelly from his music? Like, that art that they have, you cancel a person and now you want everybody to stop watching the Cosby Show and stop listening to the music? Like, if you want to cancel somebody now and you're what? You're 20 years old, 25 years old, it don't matter to you because that music has no ties to you. That TV show has no ties to you. But when you watched that TV show as a child and you saw a doctor and a lawyer in the same house together, black people, they had the kids in the house and they used real life situations to be able to make a teachable moment for kids at home. Like when I think it was Theo that was drinking. Who was drinking? Vanessa got drunk, and so they had the water out there, and they had Rudy and everybody drinking. Like, you remember that?
To this day, and I'm 39 years old.
But in that episode, you learned something, right? It taught how the dynamic of a family and kids who didn't have that dynamic could see that and see that, oh, you can have a mother and a father in the house. So you cancel Bill Cosby and you want people to stop watching the Cosby Show because you don't have any ties to it.
But then you put on a Kardashian, you know what I mean? And it's okay. I mean, you got your, like I said, even when you look at a person, like when you look at Fresh Prince, you look at that situation, you know, you got a wealthy black household where they taking a relative. How many of us take people in, you know what I mean, on a day-to-day basis? You know what I mean? You've been the king of taking people in, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like I said, when it comes to, you know, your canceling of the culture, and this is a lifestyle that was going on back then, you know what I mean? Nobody forced nobody into doing anything. Like I said, especially when it goes on today. And, you know, it's just a broad of a sense of, like I said, whether it's ecstasy or whether it's the powder form or Molly, whatever the case may be, people still doing the crap to this day.
Bro, you remember R. Kelly Trapped in the Closet?
Mm-hmm.
Bro, I'll be at work, working, listen to Star 94.5, and they'd be like, oh, we airing a new Trapped in the Closet, whatever. And I would run back to my car, turn the radio on so I can hear what's happening next, right? And then listen. And you know, it get to the end, he leave you hanging, right? You don't know what's happening. And then he get to the end and he'd be like, like with Homeboy in the first one, where Homeboy and the pastor was sleeping together. And then, you know, he come out the closet or whatever. He was like, it's a man. And he was like playing. I was like, oh my God, his mind and how he created content and songs and so forth and so on was brilliant. What he did wrong, should he be punished? Yes, he should be in prison.
Mm-hmm.
But the art, how do I erase the song for me being with my wife and us listening to one of my favorite songs by R. Kelly, "Feeling on Your Booty," because my wife got a nice booty. So anyway, when we listen to that song, like, how do I take away the memories that we have? Step in the Name of Love. How do I take the memories from that song when we used to dance together when that song came on? Like, how do I take those memories away and be like, I'm never listening to this again?
Bro,
how do you erase that art?
It's tough. I don't think you can erase that art, but then I think you have to look at intent. You know what I mean? Like, if you and I don't, I don't want to bring up a sore issue, but the dude Kramer from Seinfeld, when he was doing like a stand-up or something, and he started using the N-word because he was being heckled, and then he just kept dropping it. But when you saw the video, it seemed like he was using the N-word with malicious intent.
mm-hmm.
And so in that regards, it's like, okay, I understand where you stand. I understand how you feel. So in that respect, we could cancel your ass out because you're using that word to be harmful and out of hatred. You know what I mean? So I think you have to look at the intent when you talk about canceling. Also, how do you separate it? You got to look at that intent.
But what about the intent of somebody's, even though they don't crack their mouth open to say it, but what about the intent of the person's conscience? You know what I mean? The person just might be that type of person. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, yeah, you ain't got to open your mouth to say anything, to say, okay, well, you're saying the N-word, this, that, whatever. But what's behind the person. You know what I mean? What's probably going on behind closed doors. You know what I mean? Like I said, if you're canceling, you're going to have to cancel a lot. Like a whole lot.
You can't pick and choose. Like, for me, with the whole Kramer situation, would I cancel him? I'm not calling it cancel, but I may not mess with him no more. But again, that's a teachable moment still. I'm not telling somebody else, oh, we all need to cancel this guy. It's a teachable moment. You can have a conversation, but if like Namstradamus said, he probably did feel that way. But in that moment, from there, people can change. So if he wanted to have the conversation, sit down and talk and understand why he did that, because obviously there were some things said and he just went off the edge. He just went off. And sometimes in those situations, like, you ever been driving? And my wife's Haitian, right? So you be driving and somebody will cut you off, right? Depending on who that is, like, it could be somebody. You know what I used to tell her? What I used to tell her, we'd be driving and somebody cut us off, and I'd be like, babe, they got to be one of your people. But
were they driving a 4Runner?
Or some type of Toyota.
Or a Dodge Neon. a blue Dodge Neon.
Some type of Toyota 4Runner, Camry.
You know where he go with the blue Dodge Neon. But when it comes down to it, man, I know I've been driving and somebody cut me off, and you want to say the most disrespectful stuff to that particular person that cut you off, right? Because they cut you off. It doesn't mean that you feel that way about every single person. It means you feel that way about that person that cut you off. And I want to be as disrespectful as possible in that moment to that particular person. Doesn't mean that you're a racist. Doesn't mean that you don't like whatever. You just want to be disrespectful to that person. And that could have been that issue.
But in that regard, it's like people can change, but then you have to realize you have to make a judgment to see if people change because they actually change, or if they change because now they messed up their reputation and they need to do some PR, some damage control. You know what I mean? So like in Kramer's situation, for me personally, even if I sat down and had a conversation with him, it would be hard for me to view him any differently than what he just showed, because as you know, the saying goes, when somebody show you their true colors, believe them.
I don't always go with that. And the reason I don't always go with that, because people have moments, and it doesn't mean that moment shouldn't define their whole life. If these people spent their whole life helping people and they have a moment, that moment should define their whole life.
I live by a principle: keep your head on the swivel. That's my principle. So I watch everything. I'm watching how you move, how you talk. Yeah, you might have a moment that may have hit the spotlight, but that's not necessarily saying you didn't have any other moments that may have just got swept under the rug or they're kind of flown under the radar. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, if you can have a moment in the spotlight, what other moments you had in the dark?
Bro, I myself in my life have had moments that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not showing a pattern, to your point, you say keep your head on the swivel. You got to watch people's patterns. If they're showing a pattern of that, that's who they are. Right? So just because a person walks around here and a person is raping and killing people, but he has a moment where he does something really good, does that make him a good person?
No, but I'm saying, like, in a sense of, for an example, you ain't about to walk around and you might have a moment, like you said, the driver that just cut you off. Are you calling them whatever? Say it was a Caucasian person. Are you going to call him a cracker? This damn cracker just cut me off. Now, you just had a moment. Are you racist? Not necessarily.
No, you're not racist.
But that's what you throwing out there. You know what I mean?
Because it's the same thing with Kramer. If I got cut off, if I cut somebody off and he was like, he was yelling out the car, nigga this, nigga that. Does that make, it doesn't make him a racist. In that moment, I cut him off. He was pissed. I want to say the most disrespectful thing I can.
But there's so many other disrespectful things that you can say.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't.
That's a real character flaw, though.
Thing on it. You're missing what I'm saying.
That's a real character flaw for you to say it's okay in a moment to say the most disrespectful thing just because you made me upset. My point is, when you say that most disrespectful thing, I know it's in you. You know what I mean?
That's my
and I gotta pay attention to that. We might be cool, but I know what you got in you, and I gotta be.
So you telling me you've never done that? Never done that before?
Never done what?
Said something disrespectful.
Yeah, but no, that's not the point. So the point that you were using was Kramer, for an example. If there's so many ways you can be disrespectful, as you know, and there's so many things you can say disrespectfully to really cut somebody or to really be vulgar about a situation. Why choose that?
Because it doesn't matter what word it is.
What?
It's disrespect.
What you mean it don't matter? It does matter.
It doesn't matter what word it is, because I'm sure you done said some stuff that would be completely disrespectful to another community. We all have.
But
so
my point
no, because when you say nigga, or my bad, nigger, when you say nigger to a black person, that could be one of the most disrespectful things that you can say. But what about if you call an Asian person a chink?
Mm-hmm.
That's completely disrespectful to that community.
I agree. 1,000%.
So now we're saying, well, this word is more disrespectful than this word.
No, not at all.
It's all the same. We're saying it's the same. There's other ways to be disrespectful.
But here's the thing about it. When Kramer said it,
if somebody calls an Asian person a chink, like that's the equivalent.
It's disrespectful. It's just as well as calling a Spanish person a spick. It's the same thing. But there are so many other words. No, I have not.
None of them. You haven't said anything disrespectful. Call a woman a bitch. Anything.
No, I haven't. To be honest with you.
Boy, stop lying, boy. You lying.
No.
I know I have. I ain't gonna sit here and lie.
Now listen here. So I would say this at this point. I've never literally disrespected someone to that point. Now, maybe if you want to say a figure of speech in a moment of talking, like if I'm in a car, like you said, somebody cut you off. Like, man, this bitch done. So it's not like to you directly to say, hey, no, this is, hey, no, you're a bitch, this, that, whatever. Or no, a Chinese person will say whatever, you're a chink, this and that, whatever. I don't move that way. So at the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like I said, I keep my head on a swivel. So I'm watchful. You know what I mean? So I'm like, if it's so many ways to be disrespectful, Jay, and you know that.
It is. But
you know that. But there's some lines that you don't have to cross to say to be disrespectful.
But you're putting a level on your disrespect. Because if I call a particular woman a bitch, that may be the equivalent of a white person calling me a nigger.
Not necessarily.
If to that woman, it depends on the other person.
Because over there, like I just watched a segment. I'm sorry to even go off topic, but I watched a segment with your boy Nori on Drink Champs when it came down to it. He sat there with Ace Hood, and he was saying when he went to Miami, he was like, "Oh, these things crazy over here." When he moved to Miami, that's how you address the woman. It's like, "Oh, that's my bitch right there."
Bro, but you
versus up in New York where it was the norm to just be like, nah, you know what I mean? They'd be like, they're not gonna dress no woman like that in that sense. You know what I mean?
You know.
I'm listening.
You know, bro. Look, because of how when you're talking about these words have power to certain communities.
They do. And that's why there's so many other ways you can use other words because you know what triggers a community. You know it's going to be a hot topic.
So if you use it in that moment, does that make you the worst person ever? Because you said you got to keep your head on the swivel now. So
not the worst person ever, but it shows what you've been thinking. What crosses your mind? What's in your heart?
Show what you was thinking. Sean, get out of here.
Nostradamus, go ahead.
Show what you were thinking, not in that moment.
Nostradamus, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm rocking with you, Sean. I totally agree with you, man, because in that Kramer situation, the way that he said it was with so much hatred and so much maliciousness. On top of that, you know, if we're talking about, 100 years ago, when white people was using the N-word, at that time it was acceptable because not enough people were able to come together and say it's unacceptable. Correct. But when Kramer did it, he knew the N-word was unacceptable to be calling a black person that, especially with the ER at the end of it.
From a black person's perspective, what about the other communities?
I'm taking the sides of the other communities. I'm saying that it's not cool on either side. So you can be disrespectful in so many ways where you don't have to cross those lines. And if you're bold enough to bring that out to the forefront, it's been in your heart and in your mind to say it aloud. Whenever the hell you got to that point in life.
I don't agree. Let
me ask you this question.
In certain situations, just like I said, that don't mean you're that person. That don't mean you're racist.
Huh?
It doesn't mean you're racist.
Well, you got racist mentality.
And it doesn't mean you have a racist mentality.
Well, then let me ask you this. I'm
dead ass serious that people do this all the time. And when they come out and they say some disrespectful stuff because they want to disrespect the person that they're talking to.
Jay, how big is the vocabulary?
Who?
How big is the vocabulary?
Vocabulary? Remember on the mental on the mental health episode, right? On the mental health episode, we were talking, and you was like, you had talked to somebody, you flipped out, you made them feel this small. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then later on, you said, damn, I felt bad about what I said. Yes. In that moment, you went off on that person.
But but guess what? Guess where the trigger comes in? I know my mentality. I know what's in my mind. I know what I'm going to say. So you ain't going to be able to tell me, oh, you said this, and I'm going to reply to you, oh, I forgot I said that. Hell no. I know what's coming out my mouth. Just like I tell my wife, if we got a disagreement, and if I'm being file, she used to say, "Oh, well, you glorifying." I'm not glorifying it. I'm letting you know you ain't gonna be able to come against me and tell me that I don't know what the hell I'm saying, because I know exactly what I'm saying. So at the end of the day, you ain't gonna be able to come back to me and say, "Oh, well, you said this, that, whatever." I know what I said, and I know exactly what happened and why I said it. You know what I mean?
So if that's how you felt, then why would you feel bad on the back end?
Because at this point, you're more so, and I'm talking about on a more of a relationship status of it, when it's talking to like a family member or a friend. Me and my brother done got into conflicts. We didn't agree on different stuff, but then when I come down to it and I have to reel myself back in and say, you know what? That's my brother. I love you unconditionally no matter what. Even if we disagree on different stuff. At the end of the day, I got to be there for you 100%. But guess what? I know exactly what came out of my mouth. And yeah, I might feel bad as hell because I didn't have to get to that point. It's called self-control. But when you want to talk about crossing lines of racial tension and different things like that, there is so many other words that you can say to embarrass somebody, to cut somebody, to make somebody feel this small.
To belittle somebody is no different than saying that.
How you gonna belittle somebody when we share the same thing? I could call you a nigga and be like, "Hey, it's endearment." You know what I mean? What up, my nigga? Yes.
But in that situation, that person that was heckling, because Kramer can have a history of that. That makes you racist. When you have a history of that. If you're in a moment and you say something, it doesn't make you racist. It make a bad moment.
Hell no. Like I said, I'm going to stay on the swivel, Jay.
Exactly. That's how you know if a person is.
Listen here. At the end of the day, I bet you this. I bet you won't walk around your job talking about crack of this, crack of that, or whatever the case may be. And people are not going to look at you sideways and think that, oh, well, Jay ain't racist.
But why am I saying that? Why am I cracking this, cracking that? Why am I saying that?
Jay, you already know, like I said, at the end of the day, if somebody challenges you, you at this job site, somebody pulls your card, you feel like, okay, as a man, and then as a black man, let me stand up to this and let you know I ain't about that shit. So at that point, guess what? Yeah, what might fly out your mouth, not to say necessarily that you're a racist, but at the end of the day, you ain't got to go to that extent to be like, okay, well, you know, you calling him a peckerwood, a cracker, this, that, whatever, a wetback if it's a Spanish person, or whatever the case may be. You ain't got to step and cross them boundaries if that's not the line that you walk. There are so many other things you can do.
But what's different? I'm still disrespecting somebody.
No, because in that moment,
I'm still disrespecting whatever I say.
Here's the thing you got to understand, though, Jay. Like, they might not have a history of it, but in that moment, you see the type of person that they could be. You know what I mean? It's like,
dude, we could all be that person because we have all done it.
Well, let me ask you a question.
I have said some left stuff to my wife before, and I had to come back, apologize to my wife because that wasn't. In that moment, I wanted to hurt my wife.
So you answered the same question you asked me when it came down to me feeling like and reeling it back in and say, you know what, I understand and I realize.
I'm not the one over here saying that that's who I am.
I didn't say that's who I was either.
I'm the one saying that in that moment, I said this. That was not right. That doesn't mean that I'm that. That just means I need to check myself. I need more self-control because now I'm out here trying to hurt people.
But see, that self-control means you're just trying hard not to show something what it is. Like I don't, you know what I mean?
Because
if you need it, like you shouldn't.
Y'all tripping.
Listen, you shouldn't need
self-control
to do something that you know you shouldn't be doing,
bro. I know for a fact that we've been sitting here, and I know we have said stuff that was left field.
Well, all of us probably have.
I know that's not those people.
All of us probably have, but let me ask you guys this question, because I know there was an incident for me, but what would cause for you to cancel somebody or something like a company or something?
What? No, I'm not. So
you wouldn't cancel anybody.
I don't like this canceling stuff. But what I guess me not dealing with them would be considered canceling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So if a company is showing a pattern of whatever it may be, if a company is showing a pattern of racism, I'm gonna have to step away from the company. Maybe not Chick-fil-A, because boy, them chicken sandwich be banging. Boy, that would be tough.
And you're on the same level with some Gucci people who love Gucci so much. Same level.
Oh, the same thing.
He on that pause culture.
They're gonna put a black manager and a black dude at the window, and you're gonna be like, okay, well, they good.
Because certain people love Gucci, so it's hard for them to cancel Gucci. But that little outfit they made with the red lips or whatever, whatever, then I would be able to step away from Gucci. I guess that's considered canceled.
You know, there's one thing that happened, and for me, it was an incident with United Airlines a number of years ago, when they had selected the Asian doctor and said he had to get off, make room for somebody else or whatever. And he told them like he couldn't, because he's a doctor and he had to fly back into town because he had a surgery he had to go to like the next day. And they beat him and drug him off the airplane. I would never fly United. I would never fly United Airlines again. Never. If that was my only option to get from Florida to California, guess what I'm going to do? I'm driving. I would never fly United Airlines again. So for me, that would be a situation where I'm canceling them.
What did United Airlines do to that individual?
Beat him and drug him off the plane because he didn't want to
move.
What did
United Airlines do to the person that beat him and drug him off the plane?
Oh, what did they do to the employees?
What did they do?
Not enough, obviously.
Because I would want them gone.
But even if they're gone, these are the people who represent you. You know what I mean? So you had to do it up there with the Clippers, for an example, the owner.
Dude,
right?
And we can't do nothing.
So you saw to do with the Clippers, who owned the Clippers, who had the racial remarks and crap like that, whatever. At the end of the day, they had an option where they could have sat down, didn't play basketball, which me personally, I think they should have done. You know what I mean? At that moment, to really take a stand. But they didn't do it that way. But stuff like that, like he says, he won't fly American Airlines.
United Airlines.
United Airlines. So at that point, I mean, I don't see a problem with flying United.
Check it out.
But that's
what you guys are saying, right? With the LA Clippers, the organization, right? When that dude came out and was talking about Magic Johnson, right?
No, he was talking about black people in general. Yeah, but Magic Johnson too. Yeah,
from Magic Johnson. So, based on what you're saying about United Airlines, we should not support the Clippers at all, even though they got rid of Homeboy.
No, they got rid of Homeboy.
Right. So we're saying they got rid of Homeboy. They got rid of him, but we're saying we still should not support the Clippers.
No, that's not what he's saying. He was saying like,
let me go back.
He was saying
I'm talking about what you said, Nam.
What I said, I'm not asking you guys to cancel United Airlines.
I'm just saying
for me personally, I've canceled them.
Right. But do you do that with the Clippers? Because if they got rid of the people, if United Airlines got rid of that group of people, why not fly United Airlines? Because this can happen on American Airlines. This can happen on Delta. This can happen on Southwest. It can happen on anything. But what they do after it to correct the situation is what should matter.
I agree.
No, you're right. Point. I think at that point, the damage has been done. And for me, you know, I don't go backwards. You know, there's a there's a saying I heard is like, you'll never be able to see the sunrise if you're always going backwards. You know what I mean? So for me, because of that situation happened, I don't really care what corrective measures they took on their end. For me, it's just unacceptable for it to happen in the first place.
But you're blaming that company. Now, if it's a culture that they're creating, that's one thing. But you're blaming the company for a decision an employee made or employees made.
I get your point, Jay. But at the end of the day, he has a right, to stand how he feels, regardless. But to go back in on that situation of which it all falls under the same umbrella. When it comes down to being, like you said, if you want to use the Kramer situation, for God's sakes, there are so many other ways that you can be disrespectful and that you can get underneath a person's skin. Knowing that the climate that you're in today's world, not the 60s and 50s world, in today's world, you know exactly what lines not to cross and you know what lines to cross if you really want to be that type of person.
Dude, but you're basing that off of your perspective.
That ain't my perspective. That's a fact.
No, no, it's not facts. It's not facts because you're basing it off of how you feel. You're basing it this disrespectful because I feel it's disrespectful.
I think it's a factual social norm that you shouldn't be calling a black person
but you shouldn't
in today's society.
You shouldn't be calling a woman a bitch. You shouldn't be calling white people crackers. You shouldn't be calling Spanish people spics. Asian people, you shouldn't do it.
We agree on that aspect of it. That's what we agree on. But some women like the bitch word as being endearment. Some of them like it.
For them, that's fine. Women, they can do that.
That's fine. But we're not disagreeing with you on that aspect. But you're almost sound like you're making an excuse for Kramer to be disrespectful.
I'm not. What I'm saying is, if he doesn't have a history of it, if you keep your head on the swivel, if he doesn't have a history of it, is it wrong? Hell yes, it's still wrong.
Okay, let me put it to you this way. I'm gonna give you a piece of example.
Does that make you racist?
Let me give you an example real quick. I know somebody, right? Let me see how I can break this down real quick. I know somebody that married to a Caucasian woman, right? When I step up in the place, like I said, I'm going to keep my head on a swivel. I'm going to make sure I'm looking at faces, expressions, this and that, whatever. You know what I mean? I'll be the quiet one in the room. I don't care. I ain't no talkative person like that anyway, unless I know you or we can relate to something. So I'm going to watch. My eyes is on a swivel. Just picture yourself in the club, standing against the wall, just watching.
Hold on, Shad. Your eyes on the swivel, your neck on the swivel.
Hey,
over there
I'm on the swivel. I live by that principle. But check it out.
His head goes right while his eyes going left.
Yeah, I know, right?
Hey,
he moving. Hey, something wrong with that dude in the corner.
Hey, at the end of the day, them colors came out. Okay? And I'm sitting there looking, and I'm like, damn, these people crazy. You know what I mean? And I'm like looking at the situation, and I can see the unpleasantness, you know what I mean? And we moving with, no intention of sending any red flags. We ain't got no racist bone in our body to be like, yo, let's be racist against this, that, whatever. But at the end of the day, I saw it firsthand, okay? When you talk about being canceled out because of the color of your skin, canceled out because of the family you come from, I saw it. And it only took once. I am not around them 24/7. But it only took that one time for me to be there, for them colors to come out, and for us to know what the real deal was. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can say, okay, it's that one time, but if you're not around a person 24/7, how you know about the other times? How you know about what's going on? Like I said, that's being swept under the rug or under the radar. But that time that it did come out, it presented itself live and direct.
So here's the point to that, because you said you don't know about the times that didn't happen. No, you said you don't know about the times that it was swept under the rug. But what if it wasn't swept under the rug? What if those times weren't there?
But the actions that, like Nostradamus said, even when it came down to the Kramer situation on stage and the vulgarness of what he was saying and how he was saying it, if everything that this person says supports the situation that's at hand and it supported that whole situation that I've experienced and everything that kind of drug up to that point and kind of built that whole picture to say, oh, so that's what we're dealing with.
So then with that logic,
that only took one time. Only met him one time.
But with that logic, that makes Kevin Hart a homophobe.
He probably is a homophobe, and he should be all right to be a homophobe.
But he's not.
But if that's who he is, but that's where it comes down to canceling culture. If this is the person, he should be able to live his truth. I don't agree with it. No, you could be around me. I'm not whatever. Whatever the hell. I know some cool ones. Some cool people who go the other way and are real good friends, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, if you choose to live that light, they know what lines not to cross with you. You know what I mean? Because they know they're going to put you in an uncomfortable situation, if that makes sense.
No, but the difference when you bring up the Kevin Hart joint is you got to look at time period of when he released what he did, and you got to look at his intent. You see what I'm saying? At that time period, what he said was probably okay. I mean, it's plenty of times. I mean, we done grew up, and if somebody said something, you'd be like, "Oh man, that's gay." That don't mean you homophobe.
No, it don't. And how much you want to bet? Hold up, Jay. How much you want to bet Dwayne Wade, back in his days in Chicago, was on that whole homophobe stuff, but now you got to deal with it firsthand.
And it's going to change how you view it.
Yeah, but how, like I said, he was on that level firsthand. I'm sure he was, like I said, it was a figure of speech like Nostradamus said. No, that's gay. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily saying that, oh, I can't be around a gay person.
Listen, people still say that right now.
You're right.
So if they
why do we say pause?
So, huh?
So why do we say pause?
Because you don't want to sound like you're gay. Is actually what it comes down to, right? Let's be real.
I don't say pause.
If you, I never heard him say pause. But if you're getting to that point and you say pause, or you be like that's gay or whatever, if a person who was gay hears that, to them that may be that may be really disrespectful. You didn't mean any disrespect.
Correct.
That's true. But then that person, if they wanted to have the conversation, could then look and understand your intent was not to be disrespectful, was not to be hurtful. Intent
is based on the other individual. Like if they look at it and be like, oh, that wasn't his intent, that's how you feel about it, is not how they feel about it.
Intent is not based on the other individual, sir. Intent is based on me.
No, if you're saying this was my intent, and you just said if they look at you and they view your intent wasn't bad, because they got to look at it from their angle as well. But if they do view it as bad, you are not a homophobe. You just said that's gay. So to that person who's on the other side, who here, it doesn't matter what my intent was, is how they take it.
No, but you're right, it's how they take it. But that's what I'm saying. It gets down to the point of understanding the time frame and understanding the intention of that person before, or organization or whatever, before you can really say we're going to cancel X, Y, and Z. That's my point, right? So, Kevin Hart had his tweets from over 10 years ago. I'm sure it was a joke. There was no malicious intent there. And at that time period, it was probably okay. Whereas if you look at the Kramer situation, at the time period, it wasn't acceptable for him to be using that word, and his intent was malicious. So then you should cancel him. That's the thing. Like, you can't just cancel people just because you're sensitive at what they say. You really got to take into account the time period and the reason and what their intent is. That's what I'm saying.
We can all agree there. I can agree with you there. I disagree with the other part because I have to see a pattern. So I disagree with you there.
Well, why do you have to see a pattern if you go to a point where you say you got a Spanish person at your job, a Mexican dude, and he's sitting there working, and y'all get into a disagreement, and you talking about deporting his ass and this and that, whatever. Do you have to go to that extent? Do you have to go to that extent to say, you know what, I'm gonna deport you? Why deport?
So because you want to say the most disrespectful thing you can to hurt that person, but that's where hurt people. But
guess what? Now that person who you say you about to deport him to, now when he passed that information on to all these other Mexicans of his kind, of his culture, and be like, this black dude I work with is over here, and he may not have seen a trend that you've provided to say, oh, well, Jay has a record of being disrespectful to other ethnicities and stuff like that. At that point, like I said, who's the bad person at that point?
I think some things you do need to see a historical trend to determine if that person is what that trend is showing. But I do also believe that there's certain things where it only takes one time for you to be like, that's that person. For example,
and what are those things? Because that's all this is subjective, man.
I mean, it is subjective, but again, if somebody gets charged for being a rapist, and he only did it one time,
did he really rape?
And he did. He really did it, and it only happened one time. I think it's safe to say that that person's a rapist.
So then, if you steal something one time, I guess it's safe to say that you're a thief for the rest of your life. You're a thief.
But there's certain things.
There's triggers.
I mean, come on. Keep it buck. If you're gonna be racist, you're gonna be a thief for the rest of your life.
There's triggers and there's lines in there.
At this moment, I'm a thief for the rest of my life.
I'm a black and white guy, but in this situation, there are gray areas.
Yes.
So where's the gray area? Like,
because there's different ways of being a thief.
Being a thief is a gray area.
Why is being a thief a gray area?
Because you're a tax-paying citizen now. That's why.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It makes sense to me. People don't borrow coolers from stores. They borrow from people. Okay.
Yeah, I borrow coolers from stores so I can take care and get my money back. I only need it one time. So that's it. So I'm gonna be truthful with myself, man. I don't know what y'all talk about with this PC crap. But at the end of the day, man, if a person rapes somebody, right, they can get out of jail and I was wrong here. I need to correct this moving forward. Right. So if at that time, would you consider them a rapist? We all agree, yes. But if he gets out of jail, correct his life and move forward, do you still consider him a rapist? Do you still consider him a thief? Do you still, because you did it. So then does that follow you for the rest of your life?
It kind of does, but
it does follow you.
Everybody has to make their own distinction. Everybody has to make their own distinction as far as how much trust level is going to be there for that person. How much am I going to cancel that person, or if I'm not going to cancel that person? Like, if I knew somebody, if my neighbor, because the whole saying is, oh man, we would have never known that dude's so quiet or whatever. Like, it's always the ones that you never suspect that does something that you're always surprised about, right? If my neighbor, who I was cool with, goes over and is a pedophile and a rapist, right? If he gets out whenever he gets out, like, it's on me to say whether or not I'm gonna still be cool with him and to what extent I'm gonna be cool with him. In my mind, whether he changes or not, I'm canceling you, because those are the things that I don't condone. Like,
exactly. So you're basing it on stuff that you would say this is okay, but this isn't.
But that's what cancel culture is about, though.
I'm not agreeing with it. What I'm saying is, you can't say this is okay, but this isn't. You can get a pass on this one, but you can't get a pass on this one. Like, if it's wrong across the board. So you got to keep the same across the board.
And I agree 1,000%. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying that it's wrong I'm not saying that it's okay for a person to call a black person to call, a Spanish person to speak, or a chink, or the opposite, where they calling a black person the N-word. I'm just saying, the way that you put it, there's way more words in the vocabulary to be disrespectful to people, rather than pulling those triggers and pulling those cards.
Disrespect is disrespect.
Disrespect is disrespect, but there's also lines that as a human that you don't cross if you really not that type of person. You know what I mean?
It doesn't come down to you being that type of person. It comes down to you, and it comes down to you being if you want to be a malicious person.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about. Malicious attack.
No. Like, coming down and saying a person is a racist because they said this, it comes down to a person wanting to be malicious. I want to hurt you. My intent is to hurt you. It doesn't mean that you're a racist. It doesn't mean that you're sick. It means that I want to hurt you.
No, I take it as,
because how would you cuss out a woman on the street, call her all kinds of names, but you got a daughter at home?
You're right. That's different. That's a whole different ball game.
It's disrespect to the woman.
Like I said,
does that make you sexist?
No, it doesn't make you sexist.
She probably deserved to get cussed out.
Oh,
whereas his daughter was raised right, and she's not going to do anything to have somebody cuss her out.
What she said or what she did obviously pissed you off enough to go and say something to her. So these are things that are being traded back and forth. But you got a daughter at home, but you're going to call her all kinds of names, but you won't do that to your daughter. Does that make you sexist?
Hey, at the end of the day, if you calling these women all kind of names, this and that, whatever, some going to trigger, and you probably are calling your daughter something to that extent, where you probably just is not as vulgar, but you probably addressing her in some kind of way to where you be like, no, don't you end up like some of these bees out here in this whatever, in the streets, whatever. Or you might, like I said, you can come across disrespectfully in different ways, because it's going to carry it. If that's who you are, that's who you are.
So Sean says there's a level of disrespect to this.
There is levels.
Hey, all right, man. Look, we had an hour 21, man. We've been going in. We got to wrap this thing up, bro.
Go ahead and take us away.
Any
final thoughts?
The cancel culture, I don't agree with it, because I feel like there's better ways to handle the situation where the outcome could be beneficial instead of detrimental for one party and beneficial for the other. It could be beneficial for both parties if people sit down, have the conversation, and we always on social media anyway. So put that thing out so everybody can learn from the mistake. We got to learn from our mistakes and then move forward so we can be the best version of ourselves. If we tearing each other down, we're not going to be able to do it. Somebody's going to be on the losing end of the stick, and it basically has to do with who has more power. So for me, cancel culture out the door, because we be canceling stuff for 2 days, and then people back at Walmart buying stuff, back at Gucci buying stuff. So what's the whole point?
What he said.
I don't necessarily agree with cancel culture. I do understand what it's about, and I only, think is worth it if you're actually gonna be canceling something for a real reason. You know what I mean?
Agree.
And for example, I had said about United Airlines, I didn't like the way that they handled the situation. So I'm canceling them, but I'm not asking anybody else to cancel them. That's just me personally. And I think the whole reason why the cancel culture came about is because people has gotten sensitive to certain topics and certain things, to where when they feel offended, now they're a part of a larger community that can yield their power for them to feel like they can affect change because they're a part of a larger community connected to the social media account. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand when it happens for certain things. And if it's going to happen, then just cancel them out. Don't pause them.
All right. So, all right, folks, cancel culture, good or bad? What do you guys think? You already know what we think, but y'all sit down and have these conversations amongst yourselves, and maybe it'll be spirited like it was today. So I need you guys to subscribe, like, comment, share, hit the notification button, do all those great things. And thank you for supporting us. We really appreciate everybody. And you all have a great night, morning, or whatever you're watching this. And Sean, go ahead, you do it, because I ain't doing that.
Bye.
Peace.
Back on the grind, remember the times I'm feeling like Michael. Taking a stand, creating a plan, and beating the cycle. We got a whole lot of what we gotta do. Give me the raw, give me the real, just give me the truth. Start a conversation, then let the world debate it. Breath of fresh air coming through just like ventilation. And no boy, let me tell you about the squad. A dream team, so you know they coming hard. Now first up, let me tell you about Jay. You know he wise, man, that boy got knowledge for days. Check out his mind. Then we got Sean coming through like Thanos, keep him in line. He's a quiet storm, but don't get it twisted, you see the grind. And next up, we gotta talk about Nate. You know she slay. She got the brains and the beauty plus strength to keep him straight. And last but not least, we got Nostradamus. He's the voice of the people, so he'll keep it poppin'. My squad gon' keep it 100, and that's all facts. They're here to spark the conversation. Now you debate that.